I can't really get myself to feel compersion. How do I cultivate more compersion? I think it's important to know, like, you can cultivate it by cultivating an attitude and cultivating actions, not just trying to invoke an emotion.
Welcome to Making Polyamory Work. Hi, I'm Libby Sinbeck, and I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm a queer polyamorous mom and an integrative relationship guide, and I am committed to helping people who live and love outside the status quo have extraordinary relationships because relationships are at the core of our well-being as humans. I think love is why we're here and how we heal. Today, I am so excited to have the lovely and talented Marie Thouin on my show. Marie is my friend, and she is also the author of the upcoming book, What is Compersion? Understanding Positive Empathy in Consensually Non-Monogamous Relationships, which is the first ever comprehensive scholarly book on compersion, and it's coming out on June 18th, 2024. Marie has been featured in several magazines and podcasts, including Elle, The Savage Love Cast, and Multiamory. Oh, and now she's been on Making Polyamory Work. Marie has also published seminal research studies, the first encyclopedia entry on compersion, and she is also a mindful dating and relationship coach where she supports and guides people of all backgrounds and relational orientations to create intentional and vibrant love lives. I love this conversation that I got to have with Marie about her work on compersion. She is an academic, but we get right down into the nitty-gritty reality of compersion. And it's funny, the last time I talked about compersion on my show, it was about how you don't have to feel it and you don't have to have it, but I just really appreciate how Marie breaks down compersion and gives us a roadmap on how to cultivate it in ourselves and in our relationships. And I just think it's a real recipe for having deeper love in our lives and more successful polyamorous relationships. So I think you're going to love this conversation as much as I do. And so I'm just going to get right into it. My conversation with Marie. Hi, Marie. Welcome to Making Polyamory Work.
Thank you so much for having me, Libby. I am so honored to be here because I love your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to have you here. And we are here to talk about compersion, and you have a new book coming out, and I can't wait to hear all about your research. But before we dive in, I guess I just wanted to ask you if you would just introduce yourself. I already introduced you in the intro, but I'd just love to hear about a little bit about Marie the human.
Marie the human. Thank you. Well, let's see. I'm 39 years old. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been here for about 21 or 22 years now. I'm originally from Quebec, Canada, and I just love life. I think the thing I'll say about Marie as a human is that I have this insatiable curiosity about the human condition, what it means to be here, what it means to be here together in relationship with one another, both kind of at the micro, individual, intimate relationship level and collectively. And that's why I have gotten into the work that I do, in terms of relationship. Like, really, what does it mean and how do we do it? How do we do it in order to create better world?
Yeah, that's one of the things I really enjoy about knowing you is I feel that curiosity. I feel that hunger for learning all there is to know about life and love. And it's interesting because you have two kind of main branches of work that you do, right? You have the academic and the research side, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you also are a coach. Am I right about that?
Yes, exactly. I'm a dating and relationship coach.
Cool. So let's talk about compersion and your work
Uh-huh.
there. But I might ask you some questions about this other branch of your work as well, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. I love talking about both, and they're very connected, of course.
I was going to say, I bet they are. But let's start with like how you got into this. Like, how did you get into studying compersion and on an academic level?
hmm Well, I mean, I was always really uncomfortable with mononormativity,
Mhm.
that widespread assumption that monogamy should be the only way that we create romantic relationships. Like from a very young age, I just really thought that we should have the freedom to create relationships in the way that we see fit.
Mhm.
And so I was intrigued by communities that create relationships that are outside of the norms and how, this is something that is so stigmatized still in our society. So when I decided to study psychology in earnest and go for a PhD, I knew this was going to be my field of research. But then in 2014, I went to a conference called The Future of Monogamy and Non-Monogamy in Berkeley, California, and I encountered the word compersion for the first time.
Oh, and real quick, let's define it so that people know what it means.
Yes.
Because some people might know this word, but other
Mhm.
people might be like, "What? Compare what?"
Totally. I know it's not in the dictionary yet, which is something I would love to help change.
Yeah, get to
I've
work on that.
emailed the Merriam-Webster a couple of times to ask
Mhm.
them to include it, and they've said no so far, but well, hopefully that will change soon.
Mhm.
But shortly put, compersion is sharing other people's joy and happiness. And if we go into a little bit more detail, I actually co-authored a encyclopedia entry last year with Dr. Sharon Flicker, and we split it in three definitions because we thought that was necessary to really encompass what it means. Number one was the positive emotions and feelings that we feel with other people's happiness and successes. The second definition was the thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors that we might enact in response to other people's happiness and successes. So it doesn't have to be an emotion, it can also be thoughts and attitudes and behaviors. And that's really important in terms of polyamory and, how we navigate relationships.
Right.
And then third was compersion in a more general sense, not just in the intimate relationship realm, but in general, sharing and participating in other people's good feelings and good experiences. So compersion in a nutshell, being happy for other people, but it's a little bit more complex when we really look at it.
Okay. And so you encountered this word compersion, and it was new to you at the conference?
Yes, it was the first time I saw that word. And when I looked into what it meant, it's like this light bulb went on. I was like, that is what I think love should be like, or look like, or mean. I've been
Mhm.
raised in a society that defined love in so many ways, and some of them include control and possessiveness and wanting people to act how we want them to act. Oh, I love you and therefore I don't want you to do A, B, or C. And when I saw and understood the word compersion, I was like, oh, that's how I want to feel. I love you and therefore I want you to enjoy your life and find your own freedom. And even if it's not necessarily convenient for me, I still want to support you in that. So that was the light bulb moment that made me think, okay, I want to study this. And why is this not a widespread concept?
Right. I mean, it's interesting because the word compersion was created by the Carista commune, which was a commune in like the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And they created that word out of practicing non-monogamy. And it was specifically originally, wasn't it, like the joy that you had from your lover being with another lover. That was sort of the beginning of that word. But as you said, the definition has expanded quite a bit from there. And it's funny because to me, like that, like what you're saying about that, like it's just a way of loving people, being happy that they're happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It actually seems like that's not actually a new concept. Am I right about that?
You're right. And actually, in Buddhism, there are four qualities of the enlightened person, or Brahmaviharas, if I pronounce it correctly.
Mhm.
And these are loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and mudita, or sympathetic joy, which is very much equivalent to compersion and how we see it. And according to Buddhist philosophy, it's the hardest of the four to really
Interesting.
achieve
Really?
because it really requires that we dissolve the illusion of separation between ourselves and others. And that's very hard to do for the
Mhm.
human being, for the human ego, for how we're wired with so much of that, like, of course, we are separate in some way.
Mhm.
And we're not from a spiritual lens, but
Mhm.
that's a big challenge spiritually.
I love that because when I hear that, I think that what we're doing there with mudita, am I saying it right?
Hmm. Yes.
So with mudita, it's not just joy in other people's joy, but understanding that other people's joy isn't separate from our joy. Am I getting it right?
Hmm.
Like that that
That's
that
right.
that illusion that it's even not already our joy is broken.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like stepping out of the zero sum mentality of
Hmm.
more for you is less for me,
Right.
and actually stepping into a mindset where more for you is more for me.
Yes. Yes. Well, so that was like a light bulb moment for you. And then you
Hmm.
were like, okay, so now let me go do academic research about
Yes.
it. Is it generally how you approach things that you're excited about learning more? You're like, I want to go super deep and dig in from like in a methodical, let me just find out everything about it kind of way.
Yes, that is how I roll. I intellectualize things first.
Hmm. 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 How long have you been doing this research that is now culminated in book?
Well, it's been about a decade. I started my PhD in 2014 and started learning about compersion around that time. And then, between 2014 and 2021, I was studying, interviewing people, writing, going through a lot of revision for my PhD dissertation.
Hmm.
And then after I graduated in 2021, I started thinking about writing a book based on my dissertation. So I started shopping for the right publisher. And I think in 2022, I signed a deal with Roman and Littlefield, who have a series on relationship diversity. And so that felt like the right home for it. And
Hmm.
I'm so blessed that I got to work with Dr. Elizabeth Sheff and Dr. Richard Sprott, who are the series editor for that. So it's been really great doing more research and more writing and just also enriching the book with my experience with my coaching clients, which I
Right.
didn't really have. Like back when I was doing my PhD, I was just starting to coach. So now I feel like my work and my writing about it is a lot more nuanced and mature.
That's so cool. So this is a very long time, like a decade of
Mhm.
work and learning and process to birthing this book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it does feel like a birth. It's been a long gestation.
A very long gestation. So, would you be willing to say a little bit more about your research methods? Like how do you even research compersion? How do you do it?
Mhm.
I can't picture it.
Okay, yeah, let's get nerdy. I love that.
Yeah, let's get
Um,
nerdy.
so when something is not really well known yet, the best way to research something is qualitative research.
Mhm.
So I didn't do a big survey. I actually took a small sample, about 20 people originally. And it was a sample of non-monogamous folks who had a lot of experience with compersion. And I asked them a lot of questions. We did in-depth interviews, maybe 90-minute long interviews. And I asked them, what is compersion for you? How do you experience it? Do you feel it in your body? Is it thoughts? Is it an emotion? Is it a behavior? What is it? When do you experience it and when do you not experience it? When do you struggle to experience it? When do your partners experience it for you? So really, I had two research questions. One was, what is compersion? So really defining it and defining it, beyond just a simple definition, but really understanding it. And number two was, what are the factors that promote and hinder compersion? And the reason why, I think the motivation also behind the research was to discover, like, how do we promote more compersion, like to have some sort of roadmap.
Right.
Um, and also the fact that we can document and understand compersion, I think, does a lot to challenge mononormativity. So in that system of mononormativity, the only valid response to non-monogamy is jealousy, and
Right.
we can't even imagine an alternative. So to
Mhm.
document what compersion is and how it happens, and that we can sometimes like do things to promote it or hinder it,
Mhm.
is really challenging to that whole paradigm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I guess I'm curious, based on the research that you did, and it sounds like you also wove in the experiences from your clients when you wrote the book. What were the most practical findings that you had about compersion? Like if I was reading your book and I wanted to try to find ways to apply what you're sharing to my life or to my relationships, what were the things that were the most useful that you found?
hmm Well, one, I really am happy that I found that compersion is not just an emotion,
Hmm.
because oftentimes I think in non-monogamous relationships, people are making the mistake of pressuring each other to feel compersion. And
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the big pitfalls that I actually did notice through my work with clients is people would come into my practice and say like, hey, my partner is not feeling compersion for me in my other relationships. Can you fix them?
Mhm,
Can you get
mhm.
them to feel compersion?
Right, right.
And oftentimes it just wasn't the right context, or the person just wasn't there yet.
Well,
Maybe.
and that whole idea that you can make someone feel something, uh,
Mhm.
that in of itself, I mean, that's not how feelings work.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And that's not how love works, like
Mm-mm.
you don't want to pressure someone to feel a certain way. Like that's kind
Right.
of anti-compersion, ironically.
Well, I would even call that boundary violating. Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. So that is something that I found through my practice, but also through my research, finding that compersion doesn't only show up as an emotion, but
Right.
also as behaviors and attitudes. Like people who might come to my practice and say, I everything is fine and I am signing on to this, but I can't really get myself to feel compersion. How do I
Mhm,
cultivate more compersion?
mhm.
I think it's important to know, like, you can cultivate it by cultivating an attitude and cultivating actions, not just trying to invoke an emotion. So you
Right.
can still be in integrity and show up in a way that you want to show up without always having to like maintain this emotional state almost artificially, because we're very complex individuals. We can't just invoke an emotion all the time.
So compersion can both be a thing that you feel and a thing that you practice. Am I getting that right?
Yes, exactly.
What are some practices that you observed in your research that you would call compersive practices?
hmm So it's really kind of showing up in a supportive way for our
Mhm.
partners. So let's say my partner is going on a date with someone else and I'm feeling some jealousy or some insecurity around that, but I really want them to go on a date and I don't want to tell them not to. I can still say, like, hey, listen, I'm feeling some insecurity right now, but I really want you to have a good time. And, you look great in that outfit
Mhm.
and have a great time. So that would be in my book, showing up compersively
Mm.
because you're not sabotaging that relationship and you're still showing up supportively without forcing yourself to feel a way you're not feeling.
Right. Yeah, you're showing up with an intention to support your
Mhm.
partner's joy.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm. Mhm.
In the same way where I think even a monogamous couple, you could transfer that to like, hey, you're going to see a baseball game. I'm not that interested. I'm not
Right.
like ecstatic for you to go see this baseball game, but have a great time. I want you to be happy. I want you to enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might not even be happy about the time that you're not going to get to spend with them while they're doing it, too. You might even be bummed out. Oh, well, I'm going to stay home with the kids so that you can go watch that baseball game. But I'm doing it and I'm happy to be doing it. I'm not doing it from this place of resentment or bitterness. Instead, I'm celebrating like the way in which I am supporting and showing up for you so that you can have your joy.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
that sounds just like generosity to me. Like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if there's a dark side to that, though. Did that ever show up in your work? Like, if people were like too compersive in their practices, or pressured themselves too much to a place where it didn't feel good for them to be supporting their partner? Did that ever show up?
Well, yeah, there are people who might go to the extreme of being so self-sacrificial that
Mhm.
they don't really honor their own needs and their
Right.
own feelings. And they just always show up as like this almost like martyr-like person.
Mhm.
And that's not healthy either.
Right.
So it's important to also like look at how full is my plate?
Mhm.
Before I take everything from my plate to give it to you, can I make sure that I have a full plate relationally, individually, and socially? Which actually then leads me to the other really practical finding of my research is
Mhm.
what are the factors that promote or hinder compersion?
Mhm.
And, that is all about having a full plate in these different areas.
Mm. Mhm.
So it's like cultivating a garden where compersion can arise in a more organic and beautiful and um, integrated way.
Yeah, so if I'm hearing you right, if you have a full plate, if you're taking care of yourself and tending to what you need, that creates it's like the soil and the fertilizer to make it possible for compersion to bloom. And
Hmm.
if you're not taking care of yourself or tending to what you need, it's going to be a whole lot harder for compersion to show up. And it
Hmm.
makes sense to me because I think if we're not experiencing our own joy, it's going to be really hard to experience other people's joy as joy for ourselves because we're not tapped into our own joy. And that's
Hmm.
what we're ultimately what we're feeling when we're feeling happy for someone else is it's still our joy, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Right, exactly. And yeah, like if you want, I can run you through the 6 factors that promote compersion, and kind of the
Yeah.
flip side is what hinders compersion, and
Yeah, I
that
would love
gives an
that.
idea of what that kind of garden or ecosystem is.
Yeah.
And so, great, great. Like the first is ideological commitment to non-monogamous values. And that means being on board with what's
Mhm.
happening and being on board with non-monogamy to begin
Mhm.
with.
Mhm.
And the flip side to that would be being under duress,
Right.
sometimes poly under duress or PUD,
Mhm.
and not really having full-hearted consent to what's happening. So compersion definitely is highly dependent on consent,
Right.
and for everyone to say like a real yes to that relationship that they're in. And so yeah, that means having a clear why also, like why am I non-monogamous? Like why am I in this? Why am
Right.
I with you? Why am I
And what am I getting
agreeing
out
to
of it?
this?
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, that actually is another factor, which
Okay.
is the perception of benefits
Mm.
from your partner's other relationships. And that's where maybe compersion can be not only this spiritual ideal, but also this practical thing where, oh my gosh, yes, I'm benefiting from it. It can be almost there's a utilitarian
Right.
side to it. And I actually discuss that in my book. Like, is it, the spiritual ideal or is it utilitarian? And
Right.
ultimately, it can be both. And
Mhm.
in the best case scenario, it is both. You
Right.
are perceiving and receiving benefits from your partner's other relationship, whether it is you have a richer social life, you have a richer sexual life,
Mhm.
you are feeling less pressure to fulfill all of your partner's needs. There's so many things that people can perceive as benefits, and that definitely feeds into compersion.
Mhm.
Another one is the security within the relationship. So if you're feeling like
Mhm.
there's this sense of almost like saturation, like you have a lot of love, you have a lot of trust, you have a lot of transparency and consent and communication within a relationship, it's going to be a lot easier to be generous and to say like, oh, great, there's a surplus of love. You can give some to someone else. It doesn't feel like it's depriving me from, the little bit I have if I'm feeling scarce and insecure.
Right.
So security within the relationship is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
There's also security within ourselves.
Is that the fourth one?
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling them a little bit out of order. I hope that's okay.
Sure,
You can get the book to find what what the strict order is, but it's there's no order in the garden.
Exactly. So security in yourself, that's important too. That makes sense.
Exactly. So do I feel secure enough within myself and do I have enough autonomy, like just even financial and material autonomy where my partner spending time and resources towards someone else is not maybe as deep of a threat
Right.
to me and my livelihood and my sense of security in the world. Because if I perceive any threat, to my relationship as a deep threat to my survival,
Right.
it's going to be harder to have, again, that sense of generosity and let go. And I'm like, yes, of course, I want you to spend time and resources with someone else.
Yeah.
And there's also a sense of, are you constantly comparing yourself negatively to your metamors?
Yeah. So that insecurity, if that's driving you to comparison, of course, that would get in the way of compersion.
Exactly.
So what else? What are the other factors?
Another one, actually, talking about metamors, is having, something that would promote compersion is positive regard towards your metamors. So if you like your metamor, if you trust your metamor, if you think that they're bringing something positive to the table, and also if you don't feel threatened by them, and that can show up in so many different ways. It could be like if you don't feel like they're dramatically better than you, or if you don't feel like they're out to almost like steal your partner and be monogamous with them. If you don't think they're just taking resources away from your relationship ecosystem and actually bringing something to the plate, that has a dramatic impact on compersion. And actually, further research that I didn't do, but my colleague Sharon Flicker did, has sort of confirmed that this was probably the most weighty of the factors that influence compersion is how you feel about your metamor.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because what comes up for me is how important it is that unboardness that you were talking about before. When I think about metamors, I think about them being on board with your relationship with the shared partner, right? I find that to be really, really tough when you're getting the sense that your metamor isn't supportive of the relationship that you have. They're either indifferent or they're actively like hostile towards it. I could see that being really challenging to access compersion in that scenario.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. One of the big blocks to compersion is if you feel like your metamor doesn't want you to exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes it hard.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it goes both ways, compersion. Like if your metamor has compersion for you, it will definitely invite you having compersion for your metamor.
Yeah. That would make sense.
And then the final factor is coming into community. And that is the social factor and element to this, because of course we still live in a society that's largely mononormative, where if you call your mom, your friend, your therapist, even like you're likely to have someone tell you like, oh, no wonder you're suffering right now because you're non-monogamous. And if you were only going to be monogamous, you wouldn't be in pain right now. So it's important to have community and a support system that validates your choice to be non-monogamous. And having someone or a lot of people ideally to hang out with and to talk to, because that is not a path that you can navigate in isolation.
Yeah.
So that promotes compersion, both because it provides a support system and also role models
Mhm.
So there's people who told me like, oh, I didn't think I would be able to experience compersion until I saw it in other people. I
Right.
saw other people experiencing compersion, and then I was like, oh, okay, well, that's possible, obviously. I'm seeing it in front of my eyes, so I can also feel compersion.
Well, and we have in our neurology the ability to mirror other people's emotional experiences. And so when we see it, we can feel it through them. And then if we can feel it through them, we can feel what it would feel like for us too. So that makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense I mean, we're social animals. We develop our stories around emotion and relationship from, like you said, what we see modeled. And so if we want something different than what the mononormative structure is, then it really helps to be in a space where we can not just know it intellectually, but see it and feel it around other people. That makes so much sense. I say that all the time to
Mhm.
people. So,
Yep,
Mhm.
exactly, exactly. And even in that category, I add resources like books and podcasts like yours. And by the
Mhm.
way, your podcast is usually the first one that I send to my coaching clients because
Aw.
it's so helpful and so healing, and it's helped me a ton. So, yeah, having, like feeding your mind
Right.
with information that is outside of the monogamous paradigm and
Mhm.
actually, being reassured that how you're making your choices is okay. And
Right.
some of the pain and insecurities you're feeling is not, because you're making the wrong choice. It is, like a personal process.
Right.
And it's important to distinguish between the two. Again, there are situations where there are maybe abusive dynamics and toxic dynamics where it's not,
You
it's not
shouldn't be
the kind
feeling
of
compersion.
exactly, exactly. Compersion is not always the answer.
Right. Well, and I think that's so important. I'm so glad you said that because when you were even naming out the conditions under which you can most easily cultivate compersion, I was thinking that if those aren't present, that might not be a sign that you need to do something different yourself to make those possible. There might be some of them that might need to shift, but it also just might be a sign that you don't have the fertile ground for compersion. And
Mhm.
so it might be a sign you need to change something,
Exactly.
like the
Exactly.
relationship. Mhm.
Right. Right. And that's why, I think this kind of roadmap of factors is helpful because it helps you identify where is the bottleneck or where are the bottlenecks
Right.
in that sort of compersion system. And once you're aware of the bottlenecks, you can see like, can I do something about it? Or do I need to change my relationship altogether?
Right. Right. Yeah. So are the factors that make compersion hard, are they just kind of the inverse? Because I'm already kind of hearing, like, as we're talking, that like most of them are just like, if you're not secure in your relationship and there's not abundance, well, then compersion will be hard. If you don't have a supportive metamor and they would rather you not exist, then that makes it hard. Are there any other factors that make compersion hard that aren't just sort of the inverse of the ones that make it easy?
Mm. Well, it is very much of a mirroring effect. So yeah,
Okay.
there's nothing really outside of that. Like, so if we again take them sort of in order, like, yeah, the absence of being on board with non-monogamy or being on board
And
with your relationship would be something like being poly under duress
right,
or having a lot of internalized mononormativity.
right.
That would be a block to compersion. The inverse of feeling security within yourself could have a lot of insecurities, also sexual shame,
Mhm.
and let's see, just negative comparison is a big one.
Well, and that one you named also of like if you have a high degree of dependency on your partner, such that
Mhm.
if you didn't have them, you would like totally not be okay.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
your whole survival is tied up in this person being, 100% available to you. Of course, yeah, that would make sense that then that's going to be that whatever happens with that person is going to be tied in with your own personal survival system.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I feel like we don't
Absolutely.
talk about that enough, actually, because we often do that with partners, right? We do tie in our whole survival system with them. We create financial dependencies, we create labor dependencies. And so it can get really tricky to be like, I'm going to be okay no
Mhm.
matter what, when actually you might be significantly negatively impacted.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. That is a huge one.
Yeah. And I love that you put that in with security with yourself though too, because it
Mhm.
really is about would I feel safe within myself no matter what or no? And it's a really interesting
Mhm.
factor to bring up.
Yep. Yep. And then, of course, like the inverse of feeling secure with your relationship. I mean, there can be betrayal,
Hmm.
there can be
Hmm.
breaches of trust and breaches of consent that
Hmm.
really impact your ability to feel compersion.
Or just limited availability, like your partner not being there.
Right. Right. Exactly. Again, like if you feel like your plate, your relational plate is not full, then it's going to be very hard to watch your partner take something from your metaphorical plate and give it to someone else because you're still hungry.
Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, like some of the blocks to having a positive rapport with your metamors would be, again, like perceiving your metamor as like a cowboy, so to speak,
Right.
like someone
Hmm.
who's just here to snag your partner away,
Hmm.
someone who you just don't like. There's
Hmm.
also sometimes like if you have almost like a visceral repulsion towards a person, like sometimes we have that. And if your partner is deciding to be in a relationship with someone that you just, you have that kind of visceral no to,
Yeah.
and it's
Hmm.
not that you're afraid that they're going to steal them away, but it might actually impact the way that you feel about your partner.
Right. Hmm.
It'd be like, why are you choosing this person? Why are you choosing to make love with this person? Ew, I would never.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that might create distance and like that's a hard one because
Yeah.
you might not be able to say like, oh, there's something wrong with that relationship. It's more of this like, wow, I don't like this person.
Yeah.
And then the other factor of perceiving benefits from your partner's relationship, the
Hmm.
inverse of that would be either not perceiving any benefits or worse, feeling
It's
like
costing you.
this
Yeah.
relationship is taking away. Exactly. The cost
Hmm.
benefit is just not in your favor.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
makes it hard. Yeah. And then finally, the community factor is the absence of community. Like if
Hmm.
you are trying to do non-monogamy, just you and your partner, you're isolated, you don't have anyone else to talk to, it is going to get extra hard because anyone else you might talk to about your troubles will make it worse, most likely. They'll tell you that you're wrong, you chose wrongly, and that you need to get out of there.
Hmm. I love this. It is a beautiful roadmap, and it's interesting. I don't feel like it's just a roadmap for compersion. It feels like a roadmap for successful non-monogamy in general.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Marie, what was the most surprising thing in your research that you found?
Mm. Well, there were a few surprising things. One was that compersion and jealousy can coexist.
Oh, say more about that.
Yeah, like I had felt that, but I had never really put words onto that. And actually, me and Dr. Jolie Hamilton coined a word for that, and we call it comper struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when, a big part of you wants to feel compersion or is in a space of compersion and support for your partner's other relationships, but you're also experiencing jealousy or insecurity or grief or, some very difficult emotions. And gosh, holding both at the same time can be very confusing and interesting and a very beautiful reflection of human complexity overall. Like
Mm-hmm.
for those of us who are familiar with IFS or internal family systems, I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand. Like there's different parts of us doing different things and saying different things, but with jealousy and compersion, I think that's a great example of it's not just one thing. It's not a binary or an on-off switch.
Mm-hmm.
You can definitely experience both.
Well, I think that's the same with any like positive change that you might be making in your life. Like when I'm thinking about some relationship, like either an individual or a partnership transitioning from a more monogamous mindset to a polyamorous mindset, my thinking there is you might be really excited to embrace this new relational paradigm. You might be really excited to explore other partners, but then there might be a part of you that's really sad to let go of monogamy. that is grieving the loss of being someone's only or having
Mm-hmm.
someone be your only, even if like there's, like you said, a part of you that knows that that's not right for you, or knows that's not realistic, or knows that that's just not going to work. There might be another part of you that's like, oh, but that's there's a part of me that wanted that. There's a part of me that thought that was a really beautiful idea. And so you can feel those two things at the same time, like excitement. Oh, yes, this is right. I'm stepping into this new thing. It's going to be really cool. I'm also letting go of something different. And I experience that a lot with my clients. Like I have so many clients who are actually in that. They're like, I'm really excited to step into this new thing. And I can see all the things it's going to give me. And I think it'll make our relationship better, or it'll make my relationships with other people better. It'll make my life better. It'll be more authentic to me. Oh, but there was this other way that I'm used to. There's this other way that either me and my partner were, or that I just was in the world, that a way that I was looking at things. And now I have to like let that go and let that die.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that everybody's always prepared for that. So I love that, I think it's very similar with compersion and jealousy, right? You can have this beautiful intention, and deep, 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 deep belief. Yes, I can be happy to see you with someone else. And it can also rip me up inside at the same time.
Mm-hmm. 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 Right, right. Oh my gosh. And the ability to hold that paradox is very profound, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really
Yeah.
talks, yeah, to the capacity of human beings to hold a constellation of things at the same
Yes.
time.
And not make any of it wrong. Not make,
Right.
yeah, or a
Absolutely.
problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. I love how you always communicate from such an accepting and beautiful and compassionate place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so, we were saying just before, I know I said this just before, that this roadmap that you've made of like these 6 things that can support compersion, create that fertile ground for it to blossom, or if they're not there or something else is there that's the opposite, it can really make it very hard.
Hmm.
I know I had just said that, well, that sounds like a real recipe for a lot of success in non-monogamy, but I guess I wanted to ask you, do you think compersion is actually necessary for having a successful or harmonious polyamorous dynamic, or not?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Thanks for asking that. And that's a very important question.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll refer back to the distinction between the definitions of compersion, where, one way to see compersion is a positive emotion towards your partners of a relationship. And another definition is attitudinal compersion, or
Okay.
having a positive attitude or behavior that is supportive of your partner's other relationships. And I think the former, the emotional side, is definitely not necessary. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a bonus, like it's a great thing when you can feel it, but I don't think you should not be non-monogamous until you have that.
Right.
But then the latter, the attitudinal compersion, and overall what it means is having a positive interpretation of your partner's other relationships. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is more fundamental. Because if you
Mm.
don't have that, then, you might always be really at odds with non-monogamy, and always be really at odds with your partner's other relationships. And the grind of that can be really exhausting and
And
really
painful.
painful. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you make this distinction. Now I see like the real deep power of making the distinction between compersion as a feeling and compersion as a practice
Hmm.
or as an attitude.
Hmm.
Because I agree with you. I think that if you don't feel it, that's okay. I don't always feel happy for my partner when they're happy, even, about something that has nothing to do with them and another partner. It might be just, I might not be happy that they went to that baseball game or whatever, right? Like I might just, but you're right. I think that if I was not feeling in my heart willing to be supportive, if I wasn't feeling in my heart that their joy didn't amplify our overall life and ecosystem and everything, then oof, that would be really hard. And it might be a signal that that something needs to be looked at there. If I'm really feeling that, I'm going to use a fancy word, parsimonious. If I'm feeling that grasping, that
Hmm.
I can't I can't intentionally make room for my partner to have joy unless I'm a part of it. That might be a like you said, that seems like that would be a pretty big red flag, not just in polyamory, but I think especially if you're going to practice polyamory or non-monogamy. That yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. I think you need it. I think you need to cultivate it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, Marie, do you think that it is okay to not be there the minute you start polyamory?
Oh my God, of course.
Can you build it? Can you get there? Like, or is it if either you have it or you don't?
Oh, it definitely can be built. And part of it is just really acclimating to a new paradigm. You know,
Mhm.
I've had research participants coming to non-monogamy from an affair. After
Mm.
30 years of monogamy, one person had an affair and there was a big earthquake in their relationships. But instead of bolting, they decided to talk about what happened and why. And they decided that, you know, we do want to be with other people. We both do. So let's actually like backtrack, heal the betrayal that happened, and create non-monogamy openly and ethically and consensually. And, you know, it took a couple of years for them to really be in a good place and experience compersion for one another, but they got there. And that to me is a testament of how you can definitely grow into it as long as you're both really willing and, you know, hopefully getting something out of it. You know, like again, there's the cost benefit balance. And if it's favorable enough, then you can keep going. It's just like when one person is always dealing with more of the cost and,
Mhm.
you know, having a really hard time consistently, then, you know, it's going to be really, really hard to maintain over time.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you right, you could even take this rubric that's in your book, take these 6 elements, and really, it's not necessarily a way that you're going to rate your relationship and either you get an A and you're going to be okay, or you get a D and you're doomed, but rather you can take a look at it and you can say, okay, well, I have this, I have this. This one is really tough. This one, maybe we need to do some work around so that we can like pull the weeds out of the garden that might be choking out compersion here, and then maybe there's room for it to flourish. It doesn't all have to be
Absolutely.
there.
Right, right. And that's why I think that rubric is super helpful for
Yeah.
us coaches.
Absolutely.
No, I do actually have this rubric available on my website, whatiscompersion.com. So if people want to download it, they can. And I always encourage my clients to download it and show it to me. And then we can see what are the main bottlenecks and what can
Right.
we do about it.
Right.
Like I had a client recently actually start a non-monogamous relationship with his wife of 15 years after 15 years of monogamy. And we saw that in his rubric, the lowest score was in the community area. Like they didn't know anyone else who was non-monogamous. They didn't have anyone else to talk to. So I was able to recommend a bunch of resources, you know, including your podcast, including books, but also including a virtual community that he ended up joining and made a lot of great, meaningful connections
Yeah.
there. So now, you know, like his wife went and spent a weekend with someone else. And instead of being alone in his grief, in his insecurity, in his fear, he was able to talk to people throughout the weekend.
Yeah.
And that made
Yeah.
all the difference. And he
Absolutely.
came out of that weekend feeling like, okay, well, that was hard, but I'm okay. I'm not
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah. I recommend that so much too to my clients. And also I obviously also run two uh twice a year I do a group program where people have the opportunity there to connect with each other and really hold each other through the work that they're doing. I think community, working on your relationship in community, um, connecting to other people, practicing non-monogamy if you're practicing it is absolutely huge.
Mhm.
This has been such a delightful conversation, Marie, and I really just want to appreciate you. I'm so excited about your book.
Mm.
I am wondering, you've already shared the whatiscompersion.com. Is that the main place people can find you, or do you have other places that people can find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best places is Instagram. I post everything about everything
Yeah,
that I
your
do.
Instagram's awesome.
Thank you. So the Instagram is at love_insight_dating, or you can just type my name.
Well, and I'll
You'll
put the
find me.
link in the show
Okay,
notes, so
cool.
don't worry about that. All that'll be
Uh,
there.
I have Facebook, I have LinkedIn, and let's see what else. Yeah, definitely follow me on the socials and go to my website, whatiscompersion.com. And what else did I want to say? Yeah, just find me. And I'm so excited for folks to read my book. I would love to hear people's feedback about it as well. It's coming out on June 18th. So I don't know when this podcast will be released, but
And it's open for pre-order now. So you can get it, you
exactly.
can get your name on the list now.
Mm,
And yeah, your episode will be out before the book is released. So
amazing. So yeah,
yeah,
please go online and order it. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Roman and Littlefield website.
fantastic. Marie, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Libby. It's such an honor and a joy. Thank you for always being so, yeah, just loving and compassionate and healing in your message. I cannot tell you enough how I appreciate it, and my clients appreciate it.
That's so wonderful to hear. See you next time.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any thoughts about what I've said today or a question for the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram as thatpolyam_mom, or you can go to the show's website, makingpolyamorywork.com, and submit a question there. I'll also say that if you're loving my podcasts, but you are looking for more support, I do this for a living. I am an integrative relationship guide. So I help individuals, couples, and groups have amazing relationships. You can find out more about my offerings on my website. If you love this podcast, please share it with your friends, your networks, your Facebook groups, your coworkers, your family, etc. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you listen on iTunes, I always love getting reviews. It literally makes my day. And it'll also help more people find the show. Making Polyamory Work is created by me, Libby Sinback. It is edited by Finn of the Normalizing Non-Monogamy podcast and hosted on the Spotify podcasts platform. Vanda Leone manages the website and posts the transcripts. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.